I'm ready. Tasting. Is this thing on?
You hit the arrow.
Okay. The presentation tonight is on nuclear electromagnetic pulse and coronal mass ejection events on critical U.S. infrastructure. The reason I combine the two of those together is there's a lot of similarity. Okay. The original presentation was given to InfraGard, which is a partnership between basically the FBI and all sorts of management types from the 16 critical infrastructures in the United States. All of these things here are critical infrastructures, everything from communications and chemistry and defense and energy, especially energy and water and that type of stuff. Anyhow, my background is critical infrastructure. 35 years as a power plant engineer. I've been a ham radio operator for 20 plus years. I've been out after every hurricane, providing emergency services and utility consulting since Hugo and Ivan and Charlie and all those years ago. My apologies in advance. Everybody here, I hope, knows who Dilbert is. You're about to get a case of PowerPoint poisoning. Okay. There's three different sources really of electromagnetic pulse that we need to be concerned about. We're going to talk a little bit about how they're generated, how they differ, and how they affect electrical and other stuff. The simplest one and the fastest one is basically it's a passenger van stuffed with C4 explosives and magnets and all kinds of hardware store stuff. And when you set off the explosive, it generates a small electromagnetic pulse, and it's capable of taking out a block or two worth of computer-oriented businesses. Yes?
Is this like what they used in Ocean's 11?
I've never seen Ocean 11. I don't watch movies or television. I know. I'm one of them. Did you say Luddite earlier? Anyhow, coronal mass ejection is when you have your favorite sun basically blast millions and billions of tons of ionized hydrogen and helium off of the surface. And basically, when that expelled solar plasma passes through the electric or magnetic field of the Earth, it causes all kinds of nightmares to the Earth's field, and that causes electromagnetic disturbances all over the planet. In 1858, is the first one that was recorded, though they've been happening ever since the sun was born. But in 1858, 1859, they had a big one that basically set telegraph, the only wires that there were anywhere, set the wires and the sounders and the keys on fire and killed the battery packs. The next most famous one was in 1989, where we lost 9,400 megawatts of grid power. In 9 seconds, it was gone. In Canada and northeast U.S. Basically, it destroyed $6 billion worth of equipment. Okay, this is serious business. We had another one a couple of years ago, but that was bigger than that. Fortunately, it blasted off the backside of the sun out to somebody else's problem. We were lucky. The biggest one that we're concerned with, though, as professionals is nuclear electromagnetic pulse that occurs when a nuclear device is detonated above the Earth's surface, typically 60 to 100 miles, something greater than that. Every single pulse that's generated has three distinct time domains or phases. Each domain has its unique destructive characteristic to our toys, and basically each of those time domains is it's a result of a physical something that happened during the detonation of the bomb and the microseconds to seconds later. Basically, your EMP, electromagnetic pulse, is divided into three pieces: the early time, intermediate time, and your late time pulses. If you look at them, the first one that says E3 is a very, very high voltage, very steep attack. It happens instantaneously. There's no time passes between 0 volts per meter and its maximum. And there is the problem. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Early time, E1, basically when a weapon is detonated above the atmosphere, basically there is no pressure wave or thermal wave that reaches the Earth. It is strictly X-rays and emitted neutrons and that kind of stuff. And basically, it comes blasting out. It goes through the Earth's magnetic field and then through the atmosphere, and it basically strips off electrons from all the gas molecules, nitrogen and oxygen, and those flying electrons get guided by the Earth's magnetic field into a uniform direction, and that electrons flowing in a uniform direction makes an electric field. Because of Lenz's law, perpendicular to that is a magnetic pulse which finds its way to Earth. Now, back down here on Earth, if you have an EMP go off, a typical one is around 50,000 volts per meter field strength, which means if that pulse goes by a 1 meter long wire, that wire will have 50,000 volts superimposed on top of it. If you have one that's 1,000 meters long, you're talking 50 million volts. Okay, this is serious business here. Okay, if you work in the JEA transmission and distribution department, you know that the cables that are outside that bring wires from the transformers to your house and from the transformers to other transformers and all, they're broken down into voltage classes. And basically the bottom line is these pulses on those long wires basically will break down insulation everywhere. In other words, arcs will jump to ground and destroy stuff. This is a suspension type insulator that typically holds a cable up. The first, up in the upper left, you see there's just a little tiny purpley looking arc at the beginning of the E1 pulse. It basically breaks down the insulation and travels across the insulator. And once it goes to ground, then the power that's actually on that cable's always looking to go to ground through the least resistance. Basically, it starts a big arc, and that typically will burn the insulator to the ground. It'll take a ceramic insulator and melt it like a candle. I have seen that happen. It's pretty impressive. Here's a picture of one that's an arc flash or a flashover that's happening. The result basically is molten ceramic. If you know anything about materials, molten ceramics is pretty big stuff. This is a transformer that had an arc flash, not related to an EMP, but this is what you might see after an EMP went through and you had a flashover on a relatively small transformer. Okay, things that are affected by an E1 pulse. Everything that has to do with electric service utility, entrance cables, landline phone, television, antenna cables, anything that's a long wire. Long oil and natural gas pipelines will have this voltage superposed on them, as will like chain link fences and cow fences at the farms and railroad rails. All of them, since that magnetic pulse goes through, it sets up an electric field. Okay, depending on the local field strength, so the E1 pulse is going to, statistically, is going to tear up some of the following stuff. Is it going to be 100%? Probably not. Is it going to be more than 0%? You can bet your hiney. Okay? Stationary computing devices, control systems that have PLCs, control systems with DCSs, stationary point of sales like cash registers, ATMs, radio, TV, computer appliances, your washing machine with a microprocessor, Reddit. All of these suckers are going to have a significant statistical likelihood of failure. Okay, second pulse comes through. Here, first you have the E1, it comes blasting through basically in a 10/millionth of a second. 10th of a microsecond, it's there and gone. Not too many protective devices will stop that. E2, basically it's, again, instead of having this time you have the gamma particles come slamming into the atmosphere. They hit the oxygen and nitrogen molecules and they knock electrons out of those suckers. So you have a surplus of electrons floating around in the atmosphere, and that charge has to go somewhere. And what you end up having is a regional lightning storm. Lightning everywhere. The good news is most everything is protected against standard run-of-the-mill lightning. I know our utility grids and the telephone lines and most everything like your cable TV is relatively well protected. Okay, so the third thing that happens is the E3 pulse. This is the one that lasts for up to 100 seconds. Basically, when you have a nuclear device go off up above the atmosphere, you have a huge, all of the metal parts of the bomb are turned into plasma because of the huge amount of energy. And so this plasma, which is ionized matter, expands in a cloud away from the center of the explosion at a bazillion miles an hour, 1,000 kilometers per second. That's pretty dang fast. Okay, so you have fast conductive material moving through a magnetic field, and it generates a magnetic bubble. Okay, then the second thing that happens is that gaseous plasma bubble, because of thermal effects, basically hot air rises, hot metallic gases rise. Basically, that bubble moves up through the atmosphere and through lines of force. So for the next 50 to 100 seconds, you have another huge electromagnetic pulse being generated and sustained. Okay? Basically, what happens back at the surface of the Earth is all of this stuff that's happening doesn't happen uniformly. So you have bazillions of electrons over here and only half a bazillion of electrons over here. And you have the Earth has a differential charge from this mile over here and 5 miles down here. It's different. Well, the problem is all of our utility substations, that's what this thing over here with a Y is, that's a transformer winding. Basically, the center of the winding is grounded. Well, the ground on one end is at a higher potential than the other, so current flows through the system, and it just happens to go through the high voltage lines overhead, 5, 10, 15, 100 miles away. And it superposes a direct current voltage on the transformer. Transformers do not like direct current. It causes bad things to happen, okay? And basically, you end up getting core saturation, overheating, 100 bad things inside the transformer, and the fireball is what results, okay? Basically, the E3 actually does the physical damage to the transformers. Okay, so saturating the transformer core, distorting the voltage and current waveforms, generating excessive reactive power. Those are the three things you never do to a substation, and this E3 does all three of them simultaneously for a long period of time. Things go bang. Okay, so you'd say, well, why aren't these transformers protected from this? Well, they are. We have all kinds of breakers and measuring equipment and stuff like that that watches them 24/7. But that E1 pulse, remember that E1 pulse? It comes through and boom, destroys all of that newfangled electronic disco crud stuff that now protects everything that we own. And so basically the burglar alarm is gone, so the burglar sneaks in and kills the transformer. Okay, just for an idea, these are big transformers. Some of them are 7.5 now. This is old information. $7 to $10 million is a spit in the bucket for one of these transformers. And the lead time when you go to buy a new one is 12 to 24 months. You cut the check, and 12 to 24 months later, they have a new one. But to add to the fun, look, these are big devices that last forever and ever, amen. And nobody buys spares because they're so expensive. But the bottom line is the total world production of all the companies that build these transformers is about 100 units per year. So when you have 5,000 of them killed like that, how long is it going to take for you to get your electric system back up? Forever. Okay. According to the latest EMP Commission report, which came out from the U.S. Armed Services Committee, basically the analysis they did on the original EMP testing by the Russians, and what they're doing is they've taken old data, put it through new models, and they go, we've been seriously underestimating the threat here. It's 3 times worse than what we thought. Okay? And the U.S. utility officials, they go, we'll continue to only worry about stuff up to the 8 volts per meter or kilometer level, not 24, 25, 26 like it really is. Okay. This little graph here is what they call a smile diagram. If you set up a nuke above Omaha, Nebraska, you can count on that big ring. You see a little smile in the middle? That's why it's called a smile diagram. Basically, you have a substantial E1 effect 1,000 miles away. Okay, that's most of the United States, isn't it? Okay. All right. To summarize this, the most significant EMP risk is the E1 pulse and the E3 pulse working together as a perfect storm to kill utility stuff. Okay? Just about everything else can be replaced in a relatively small amount of time. Breakers and insulators and transformers are long lead time items, and they're very low production items. Okay. The super fast E1 rise avoids the lightnings and surge arresters, and it takes out our protective gear. The slow E3 pulse comes through behind it, and it kills everything that should have been protected by those breakers and lightning arresters and stuff. Okay, and then when all that happens, the transformer overheats and fails because of the E3 pulse coming through. Let's see. All of the testing that these numbers are based on was done at 50 kilovolts per meter field strength. And there's discussion at this point that the Russians have devices that will go to 200 instead of 50, okay? The interesting thing is the damage done is not linear, it is exponential, so quadrupling the amount of field strength is probably going to increase the damage effect by a factor of 10. Not good. Okay. Rules of thumb. I've been studying this since 2007, and I've read every single unclassified document that I've been able to find on it, okay? So this is based on my experience as a utility engineer and a tinkerer and a person that can do research. Since it's an electromagnetic phenomena, basically it follows the inverse square law. If you double the distance, you cut the strength by a factor of 4. Light, radio waves, everything works that way. It will get into everything electronic that has a 1 or 2 foot long cord on it. Microphone cord on your ham radio, the earphones wire going to your computer toys. There will be some cause of utility line insulator flashover. There's no way to predict what that's going to be. The dirty insulators will flash over and die faster. The ones out at the beach that have salt deposited on will probably fail faster. Okay. E1's going to damage relay and control circuits on utility transformers, and the E3 pulse is going to finish it off. Everything that has SCADA and DCS and PLCs will be toast. Does everybody know what those are? Okay, programmable logic controllers. It's a PC that controls electronic stuff. You use your PC to turn the lights on and off around the house and in the garage, okay? DCS is just a bigger version of that distributed control system. Basically, that is water plants, sewage treatment plants, chemical plants, steel mills, everything's run is automated by a PLC today, or a DCS. What else did I leave out of there? SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. JEA controls all of the breakers and runs the power plants up and down to meet load with SCADA. Remote control monitoring and control. Basically, you do it, everything's controlled from this little office over here, and they run the generators up and down and open and close breakers remotely. Okay. This basically has allowed us and every other utility to get rid of employees, because we don't have to have somebody in a pickup truck running around from substation to substation, opening and closing breakers and doing manual things. That's going to come back and bite us on the backside. Okay. Everything that has to do with radio communications is toast. You can count on that. Okay, automobiles. I'm sure everybody's seen a movie that had an EMP attack in it, and everybody's car stops. That's baloney. You may have 5 to 10%, maybe 20% of the automobiles fail. An automobile is designed to contain electromagnetic interference that's generated by the control system. So all the cables are shielded. They're run inside of metallic conduit, if you will. They're down in the crack of the transmission tunnel. Basically, cars survive pretty well, and that is backed up by testing, at least up to 50 kilovolts per meter. The E3, the big pulse that comes through and it lasts for a long time, it hangs in there. That's only going to affect things that have long wires. It's not going to mess with your cell phone or your iPad or the car's control system or the washing machine's microprocessor, because it doesn't have a big, long cord attached to it. There has to be an antenna to pick up this long, slow pulse, okay? So you shouldn't have any standalone devices. You shouldn't have any problem. However, everything that's a standalone device is designed to run with a central communication system. Yes?
I have an underground gas pipeline going by my house.
Yeah.
Is that going to be affected?
It will see current and, sure. What will it do? Probably whatever's at either end of it's going to get a rude surprise. All the time that metallic pipe is immersed in the earth, in the ground, it's grounding, it's dissipating that charge. The problem is the ground better than the generator of the pulse, you know? Who's going to win, dissipation or generation? And nobody will know until we see it happen. Okay. Again, automobiles should not be greatly affected by an EMP pulse or an E3 pulse especially, because it's not dragging a 100-foot long cable behind it to act as an antenna. Okay, yes?
Unless you mean an electric car that's plugged in.
Correct. My presentation is outdated. I'll have to add some evil things in there for people that have electric cars. Okay. I was asked specifically by the InfraGard people to come up with a scenario, an attack scenario, and how it might affect the 16 infrastructure components and what the people, the managers of those areas could do to help themselves. So I came up with a scenario. Since I work in a coal-fired power plant, I'm very familiar with the barges that bring coal in. They're big. Okay, they're ocean-going boats, and you see them all over the world, and one more or less in the fleet going back and forth isn't going to open up any surprised eyes. Did I miss a picture? No. Anyhow, there's Iranian and North Korean missile systems that are way small enough and way capable enough to be welded into the bottom of the hold of one of these suckers and close the lid. Okay, the Shahab 3 in particular has got a capability of 2,600 pounds and 1,300 kilometers, so basically 1,000 miles. Okay, if you can toss a 2,600 nuke package 1,000 miles, you can cause some problems. Okay, that's a picture of me down in one of our coal barges. These suckers are huge, so there's no problem with putting one of these missiles on its trailer. It's a Rector trailer, and welding it to the bottom, you know, taking the wheels off and welding it to the bottom. All you have to do is open the lid and fire. So you have this guy, and he goes up the St. Lawrence River and past Quebec and Montreal into Lake Ontario, through the lock system and over to Toledo, Ohio. And then you open the lids up on that sucker, and like a good neighbor, basically, you fire your missile with a nuclear device on it, and you aim, in this case, you aim for basically another city in Ohio. And basically, you program the device to where it goes off at the apogee or the peak of the travel of the missile. That's hundreds of miles up in the air, ideal for creating an EMP pulse. Okay? The people on the ground aren't going to see anything but a flash. Poof, that's it. And then the lights go out. Okay, I picked Chicago because this company called Meditech was kind enough to publish their results of this huge government study where they modeled the entire electric grid of the United States for torment with various terrorist attacks, one of them being an EMP. And they had 5 different cities in the U.S. where they could guarantee that the entire U.S. grid would collapse if you set a nuke off above the top of those. Okay? And if I remember correct, New York City, Chicago, Dallas, there was one in Washington, and there's a 4th one. But the good thing is they gave us all this data and information that I could use for this presentation, and any terrorist could use to plan an attack with. Here's the output, the graphical output from the report. All those, you can see the big bang, the yellow star in the middle, and the green and red are basically effect areas, and those are places where where the ground currents created by the E3 pulse are going to tear up equipment. Okay. I chose to use New York City as a backup plan, you know, for my terrorist attack, because hey, if you're going over to the St. Lawrence River, well, if the U.S. Army comes headed towards you, or the Navy or something is threatening to sink your butt there in the river, well, you can just open the lid up and change the programming for New York and not even have to go over there. You'll have the same problem. Okay, the effects will be slightly different, but the result will be the same. The entire U.S. grid will come down. Also, this graphical output basically shows how many critical high voltage circuit breakers on transmission lines are at risk for damage due to the currents generated by the EMP. Yeah, Florida is pretty primitive. Not. This is another graphic output from the same model. Basically, it's showing you each one of those little squares is a substation that has, the ones that are above the blue line have more they have more EMP current on them than they normally have at overload on a normal day. Okay, they're actually carrying more current from the EMP than they are from the utilities that are sucking power off of their lines. Okay, there's a little bit under half of those that are that bad. Okay, every one of those squares that's above the blue line is going to trip. It's basically going to pop the breaker. Ooh, I forgot. The E1 came through and killed the control circuits. Who is it? So, who cares about Chicago? What about North Florida? Okay, so 1,000 miles or so away, this is what happens. On day one, during and after the EMP attack on Chicago, basically the U.S. utility grid is broken down into little pieces called islands. You know, the entire U.S. is tied together with a spider web, a complicated spider web of interconnecting electrical lines, okay? And the reason we have reliable electricity in the U.S. is because they're all tied together. And when somebody has a little problem over here, they go, let's ship a little power from over here to here. Well, and they're all interconnected by all those relay stations or substations, each of those little squares on that map or that grid. Okay. Back here in Jacksonville at Hometown Utility, because I'm not allowed to say their name in vain, the dispatcher is finding out that we're one of the many utilities without any power. Basically, all of our generating units will have tripped offline. Over current, under frequency, all kinds of things. They're going to go nuts. All of the electronics are going to lose. Everybody knows what a handshake is in a serial or parallel port circuit, or anyhow, it's basically I send the printer a signal. The printer says, okay, I got the signal, and it sends me a signal back that says, I got it, okay? Everything in electronics has one of those. All of those will be they'll be disrupted. So there'll be a lack of communication pretty quickly. Here in Jacksonville, there'll be some cell phones that are up because there'll be some of the towers that did not get killed by the E1 pulse, okay? They'll be up on their emergency generators, assuming that their transfer switches that have all kinds of microprocessors in them didn't fail. If you have an emergency generator anywhere, the number one thing that's going to fail, and it's going to be this transfer. And that's today or during an EMP. On-site fuel for the generators is going to last for a couple of days. The cell phone providers basically prioritize who could use the cell phones at all times. Police, fire, rescue, the military, you as the residential customer are basically SOL, okay? I can tell you from experience that on our trunking radio and cell phones working for JEA that we've had a couple of incidents where basically the police and fire knocked us off of the net, okay? And that was trivial stuff like a tornado touching down on the north side. They're wonderful. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm very hard of hearing.
Okay, ask if the microcontrollers are down or knocked off, how can they prioritize who can use the cell towers. They don't have.
That's assuming if the system's working, it will be prioritizing. The cell phone systems are set up to where basically when somebody dials, some manager somewhere dials a number of the phone, basically the whole cell phone system goes into emergency prioritization. If your phone number is not police, fire, rescue, military, cell phone company, the mayor, that's some of the idiots will be still on there. Basically, it just will ignore you. It won't listen to your ID number. Okay, it's dead anyhow. Okay, so another thing about cell phones, even when everything's working perfectly, if you have too many people on the system will crash. It's a subscriber system. It is designed only to have 10% of the people paying the bills on the hardware at any given time. Telegraph, telephone, pager systems, cell phones, trunking radio systems, they all work on the same principle. Okay, so everything's tripped out in all of the generating stations. We've got some transformers that we think might be damaged. The first thing that we're going to do is try to restart the generating systems. Okay, there's no electric power. All of the generating units are tripped off, and every generating station has to have a substantial chunk of power to crank up their equipment. And we have a way of dealing with that. One of our generating stations has a huge diesel gen set. It's like 2 diesel locomotives back to back that can make enough electricity to start one combustion turbine or gas turbine. And once you get that gas turbine going, then you can feed that electricity to other gas turbines in that same plant, and now you have a useful block of power to start the generating station. That's called a black start procedure. Okay? Every utility in the U.S. is going to be having to black start their equipment. Oh, guess what? There's a hell of a lot of utilities out there that do not have black start equipment. We only got ours in the 1980s. I watched them install it. Okay. Interesting, in the state of Florida, as of 2020, 75% of all of our electric generation comes from natural gas. So what do you think the first thing that's going to fail is going to be? We have 2 lines that come to Florida to provide natural gas for everything, whether it's heating the hospitals, heating your house, providing electric generation. 2 lines. It's not a single point of failure, but it's pretty damn close. Okay, they have pumping stations every few miles, and the pumping station, they bleed off a little gas out of the line that they're pumping from to run an engine that drives the pump that pressurizes the gas to push it further down the line. So it's pumping station, pumping station, pumping station, pumping. Oh, does anybody remember that gasoline line shutdown they had about 2 months ago? You think that was bad? Wait till this happens. When the gasoline gets turned off, everybody's got a couple days worth in their car. The gas stations have a few days in the tanks. When the gas line shuts down, you don't store natural gas. It's just in the pipe. When the compressors stop, the electricity goes off in a matter of minutes. Okay? The entire state of Florida will be without electricity 75% worth anyhow. Okay? It's just that simple. Good thing is we still, at this moment, have some solid fuel boilers in our system here, and they are pretty complicated, but hopefully we'll be able to bootstrap those suckers from our black start unit and start pushing electricity out. You can count on little or no mutual aid crew from the next state or 2 states over like you normally do with a hurricane. You know, JEA right now has people in Louisiana and Mississippi for the last hurricane, okay? When everybody has hurricane damage equally bad, there ain't no mutual aid crews to go help anybody. That's what we'll see here, okay? Can we borrow spare transformers and breakers and insulators and cards and all that kind of stuff? Not until our stuff's working, okay? There's not going to be any mutual aid opportunity here. Okay, out at my old power plant, they'll have people out there bypassing the fancy electronic control systems trying to get stuff to work manually. The problem with that is we have a much smaller crew nowadays than we did 25, 30 years ago when I started, because we've automated everything. So they're going to be running around with chickens with no heads. And that's assuming we got some smart ones out there and ones that have some initiative, that are willing to do what the boss told them 1,000 times never to do, just so we can get this emergency system running. Okay? But anyhow, once we get one gas turbine started, we'll light off 3 other gas turbines off of it, and then we'll start powering up our solid fuel burning machines, and that's going to take days. It takes days on a good day. Okay? That's when you have all of your equipment and you know it's working. How much of the control equipment in our power plant is going to be decimated by that E1 pulse that comes through? A lot. But we have some good guys out there. I trust that they're going to be able to take care of that. Okay, so anyhow, that's just in the power generation end. The guys out in the field that have to deal with all the transmission lines and the wires and all that kind of stuff and the breakers and the substations, they don't have a radio system to help coordinate. They don't have cell phones. They're going to have to do their job on paper and drive from the central office out to whatever breaker needs to be opened or closed, and then go out there and do it, and then come back and tell the dispatcher that's been done. So instead of the boss saying, hey, flip on 3A, it happens like that. It'll take an hour or 2 to get it done. Okay? It's going to be miserable. It's going to be slow. All the crews out there are going to get to be dealing with all kinds of stuff like people that don't have food, don't have water, don't have gasoline. They're going to be trying to deal with those kind of issues also. Okay? Remember that the normal order of restoration in the utility is the police and the fire stations, the hospitals, other public service, health entities, and right now it's going to be screw all y'all. We've got to get these generating units up. Okay? Okay. If you think the Buckman Bridge and the Dames Point Bridge and I-295 suck on a normal day, wait till you have 5% of the cars just come to a stop. How many idiots are going to be out there and they leave their car right in the fast lane? How many times do you see that on a good day? Okay? But with 5%, I actually looked up how many cars go over the Buckman Bridge. It's like 130,000 cars a day. Okay? 5% of that's a hell of a lot of cars sitting there doing nothing. A lot of these cars, basically, they'll just, like, you'll be cruising along, and when the pulse hits, basically, it confuses the processor, and you'll have to do a Bill Gates restart. Turn the key off, turn the key back on, crank it up, and it runs. 90%, 95% of the cars will start back up, and they could go on their merry way, running for the hills or wherever they're going. The other ones aren't going to be so lucky. But you can bet all those cars, 5% of the cars that are on the Buckman Bridge at any given time, just stopping in the middle of the road, is going to stop the flow. You can guarantee that. Traffic signals, gone. Convenience store, no gasoline. Cash registers don't work. The regional fuel distributors can't fill the trucks up to bring gas to the gas stations because they don't have any power to fill the daggum truck up. Refrigeration's off in the stores and in the food storage warehouses. Cash registers, emergency lights are running on the backup generator at your local Publix and Winn-Dixie, but they won't have any connectivity to their suppliers to order food to fill up their shelves. I'm sorry? It's going to be ugly. All that stuff that grocery stores have learned to depend on, the scanners to scan the tags on the, even if the scanners work, the communication lines to their warehouses will probably be down. Even if only one of them is down, like only Winn-Dixie can't get stuff. What is a nightmare is that going to be like, you know? Okay, a week from then, you still won't be able to get any cash from the ATM. Your AM radio in your car is going to work, and the local emergency service broadcast is going to be reminding you that there is now martial law declared. You need to be home before sunset. Lock the doors. Okay? Water and wastewater. They'll be rationing water by that time. More importantly, they will be rationing sewer. Because if you don't pump the sewer out of the house, the people aren't going to turn the water on to fill the toilet back up. I did not make that up. That was told to me by somebody that will remain nameless. Okay, the entire region will be running off of little diesel generators all over the place. Okay, yes.
Tell us about the sewer again.
Let's not focus on that. That is a very sore point.
No, we didn't understand.
He didn't understand.
Okay,
Not quite done.
when it comes time to ration water, they don't turn the water off. They stop pumping the sewage out of the manholes to the sewage treatment plants. I was told that by a manager. Okay.
They do not understand what that means.
Okay, basically, that forces the people at the house to quit flushing the toilets because otherwise they will run over onto their rug. So they will not be using water. Okay, it's just a tactic. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I heard that. Okay, I'll deny that anybody ever heard that from me. Martial law. People are going to be hungry, looking for food. Crime's going to be drastically up from a week ago. Won't be no street lights in some areas. Only partial public service radio, if any. Most businesses closed after a few days because you can't sell nothing, can't buy nothing, can't see nothing. Still, by day 8, I'm guessing they'll probably have power back on to 25% of critical circuits. Police, fire, rescue, hospital, stuff like that. A fourth of them only. Natural gas lines are still out. They are working like crazy to get those pumping stations back up. Once again, they're hampered by having no communication, fuel shortages for the guys that are running back and forth in their pickup trucks. It's going to be a nightmare. Starting up the coal fire generating units, which we have 3 months of, we used to have 3 months of coal sitting on the ground. Well, we don't have a coal plant anymore. Y'all may know that. It's gone. So we no longer have a generating unit that has 3 months worth of fuel stored on the ground. Oh, they didn't think about that. But we no longer have a long-term fuel storage capability for this utility. Okay, but regardless, those machines were very, very complicated and they had dozens of DCS, distributed control systems, and those suckers are probably 50% toast. The technicians will probably be robbing parts from one of those machines trying to make some of the other stuff work. We did try to standardize stuff. Okay. The gas turbines, these are like jet engines that are bolted to the ground that have giant generators. Instead of making thrust, they make rotational energy and turn a generator. They're basically 50, 60 megawatts apiece, but they burn 100 gallons a minute of diesel fuel. Okay, think about that. 100 gallons a minute times 4. 400 gallons a minute is what it's going to take to run those machines so we can be rebooting the system. Once we get those 4 machines running, we'll be trying to get the fuel oil burning machines running, trying to get some power back on the grid. Okay, the crime around town is going to increase. The enterprising retailers will probably have generators at their stores so they can sell gas. What are they going to sell it for? I bet a lot of them are going to be people are going to be trading for gasoline. Gasoline and cash are going to be well thought of. If you left your car where it's stalled, somebody's probably going to have removed the gasoline from it at the very least. Okay, so this is where we get to the point where we ask the managers in these places, these infrastructure groups, if the power goes off for 3 days, what are you going to do? What would you anticipate? A month later and the power's still not on. What are you going to do? What actions can you do today to be thinking about and preparing for a situation like this? This is a nightmare of epic proportion. There's really not a good answer. I know what my answer is. I'm going to be the hell out of here. Okay? All right. What is the energy sector's priority going to be? Restoring natural gas pipelines and liquid fuel, gasoline and diesel fuel pipelines. Okay? Local power restoration is going to be prioritized into getting the high voltage transmission breakers and transformers fixed and getting the generating stations going. Wastewater and water, potable water and fuel are going to be precious. They're going to have emergency generators on in every single water and sewage treatment plant, keeping the water going in and the poop coming back. Okay. That means that a substantial number of people are going to be driving fuel trucks around. We had over 500 diesel gensets in the system. That is a 24/7, 365 job for a pile of people and trucks. Okay, that's just to keep the sewage moving into the sewage treatment plant and the water going out. Okay. Tank trucks filled with potable water from the water treatment plants will probably be going out to local shopping centers to give people whose water system isn't working something to drink. Cell phone system. The system's going to be totally occupied by law enforcement, fire and rescue, and utility recovery. They use CALS trailers. Do you know what a CAL trailer is? That's a cell on wheels. It's a portable cell system that's built onto a trailer. They pull them in, they got a diesel generator they run, and they basically they replace the cell tower that you love in your neighborhood that looks like a palm tree. Okay, the ones that are dead will be replaced by these portable units, but they'll still be prioritized only for law enforcement, military, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we actually have a EMP hardened FEMA operated AM broadcast station here in Jacksonville, WOKV AM. Its purpose is in case of atomic attack and all the other communications are down, that they could communicate just using the AM broadcast station as a ham radio station to talk across the country. Okay, and then whenever they feel like we need to know that there's a storm coming, they can tell us about that. But that's what its chief purpose is for. Broadcast and TV stations do not typically have backup generation, so they'll be off the air. One of the chief things that we're going to have to do is get the internet back up, because everything runs on the internet now. So there's going to be a priority of getting power restored to the internet service providers and all of the little relay stations and all of those stupid little boxes all over the world. Okay. I'd say that the trunking radio system that police, fire, rescue, mayor's office, the dog catcher uses here in town, at least half of it will be dead. Okay? That's my opinion, based on having worked around it for 20 years. All of the overflow public safety communications that come in over the cell phones basically are, they're going to, you know, what do you do when grandma keels over? I mean, you can't use the landline. You might be able to use the cell phone. The public service people, the dispatchers, are going to be screwed because they have no communications in or out to speak of. Okay, I predict that many citizens will be exercising their stand your ground rights in the state of Florida. I mean, think about it. No lights, no active police communication, no EMS, emergency rescue stuff. It's going to be a mess. The public safety and the utility people will avoid certain areas to protect themselves. They do that today. The governor will mobilize the Florida National Guard. About 10 minutes after they do that, they're going to, oh, this is never going to help. We're going to call the president and have them enact DSCA, which is the Defense Support of Civilian Authorities, which brings the feds in. Okay, just going to add another layer of fun and excitement. The problem is it's going to happen this way in all of the 48 contiguous states, every county. Everybody's going to be calling for the same help. Okay, food and agriculture, got to have power to store your warehoused foods and to do your food supply reordering and loading and dealing with shipping logistics. There's going to have to be a renewed coordination between the over-the-road truckers and the railroads in order to move enough food to keep people eating. All of this stuff is just, it's an entanglement of a spider web that somebody busted the center out of. And that center of that web is electricity and communications. Okay? Okay, so they're going to have to start getting food from the farmers to the food processing places, which is going to require communications, logistics, you know, the whole 9 yards. The same story, the second verse. Oh gosh, healthcare facilities. Inability to get sufficient fuel to power the backup generation at the hospitals and the old folks' homes and all that stuff is obviously going to cause big problems. Okay? It's going to be a nightmare. Transportation sector, railroads. I would say, I'm a ASC master mechanic as well as an engineer. I'm very familiar with diesels and modern diesel equipment, and I am a train fan extraordinaire, so I'm very familiar with railroad locomotives also. I'm saying that 95% of the locomotives that were far a certain arbitrary distance away from the EMP blast will survive. I'm saying most of the ones south of the Missouri, Kentucky, Virginia state line will probably survive. Just a guess. Just a guess. But somewhere, when you get a certain distance away, you're going to have a lesser mortality rate on your control systems. Everything that's diesel today has electronics associated with it, right? It's no longer a simple compression ignition beast. It has all kinds of emission control and efficiency control stuff, and they're just as complicated as regular gasoline engines. Okay, the big thing with the railroads is they use radio and internet and satellite communications and everything you can think of to keep millions of trains running in the same, you know, like this all the time with minimal collisions. That system is going to fail. So that's going to mean they have to go back to old-fashioned, old-timey scheduling and dispatching methodologies, which is going to be ugly. The fact that right after the airburst of the EMP device, basically all of this stuff's going to quit instantaneously within a tenth of a second across the U.S. So Mr. Locomotive Engineer is cruising down the track, and he sees a green light of half a mile ahead, and all of a sudden it goes out. It's like, oh crap.
Stop.
Yes, stop. If somebody gets smart and goes, of course, the railroads are very smart. They basically make ignoring the control signals a firing offense. You don't get a second chance ever. Okay, so you're going to have every train in the system is going to quit, whether it's under its own volition or because the EMP took it out. Okay, trains sitting on sidings, trains sitting and waiting for repairs, trains waiting for dispatch orders to go somewhere, trains sitting still today, this afternoon, this evening, are a target for hijacking, okay? I watch trains 2 or 3 nights a week, and basically every train that comes into Moncrief Yard or leaves Moncrief Yard, they follow it in and follow it out with either an Easy Go or a pickup truck with an armed guard. Okay, trains sitting still are targets. When people are hungry and they want fuel, they're going to be a little less likely to behave themselves. Okay. Again, over the road trucks, some of them are going to fail, some aren't, but they're still going to have fuel problems. Okay. Anybody knows an over-the-road trucker? I have a handful of friends that are hams. And basically, they depend on cell phone and satellite communication to do everything. I mean, to get where do I go next, boss? What do I pick up? Where do I take it? When you lose communications, you lose your logistics, and that's just basically going to shut the whole system down. Aircraft. This is particularly ugly. I looked this up. Typically, there's about 42,000 air flights in the continental U.S. each day. 42,000. And basically that means, and I looked, they actually broke this down with a bell curve and how many, what time of day. Well, early in the day when everybody's trying to get to work in some other city, there's up to 5,000 aircraft in the air at a time. Okay, so if you have an airburst from an EMP, there's going to be some damage to the airport control. You know, your air traffic control centers. You're going to have some damage to radio gear in the aircraft themselves. The good thing is that aircraft are designed to survive direct lightning strikes. Did you know that? That happens all the time. Okay, it's very, very seldom that they have an E2 attack on an airplane and have any kind of mishap. But the communications gear and the control on the ground is not quite so lucky. The most likely thing that'll happen after an EMP burst is the dispatchers, if they air traffic controllers, if they can communicate with an aircraft, they're going to say return to base. The safest thing to do is to come back. Wherever you are, just come back. And then it's going to be a cloud of airplanes in the sky, and there's going to be problems. You can bet your bottom dollar that the people that need diesel fuel are going to be looking at the airport's JP8 and Jet A aircraft kerosene, because they'll burn in diesel engines. Military does it all the time. This is all the major airports in the U.S. You see where Chicago is. Look at all of the airports that are close to the airburst. I think there was 13 of them I counted within like 500 miles. They're going to have problems. Okay. Nuclear reactors. This is one of the fun ones. Again, there's Chicago. Look how many, there's 10 nuclear plants within close proximity. Okay. They are going to have problems. They're going to have control system, DCS and PLC problems, no doubt about it. Okay. Hopefully their control rod systems work well. The next problem for them, though, is, and this is the priority in a nuclear plant, reactor plant physical security. There are guys with machine guns on duty. Okay. Those guys are going to be woke up. They're not going to be drinking coffee. Reactor safety, your cooling system and backups. Water storage facility, physical security. What happened in Fukushima? Lost power to the backup cooling system. So there's going to be a critical need for diesel fuel at all of those sites. They're supposed to have 2 weeks of fuel in the tank on the site. Y'all know what this is? That's what my boss used to tell me. Trust me. Okay. You can be sure that FEMA will be adding manpower and security resources to protect that stuff. Good news in the dam sector, the hydroelectric people. Hydroelectric plants are relatively simple, and there's a lot of them out there that you can out there and open gates with a couple of guys and a long wrench. You can open the valve and turn the daggum water back on and start making some electricity. Once you get electricity, maybe some of the rest of the controls in the dam will work. The bottom line is in Georgia, we have 19, Georgia has 19 hydro plants, Florida has 2. So there should be, in a relatively reasonable amount of time, a little bit of power to help with regenerating the rest of the system. Okay. Also, the good thing about Georgia being next door to us is they got a lot of hydropower, which means we don't have to ship any of ours over there to help. All those little things are important when it comes to rebooting the system. Y'all are all IT technology people, right? Show hands. How many people are IT weenies? Okay. What are the rest of you guys? Well, how much of your budget has ever been considered for looking into lightning arrestor protection for your computers and stuff, much less EMP? Okay, 0. So basically, if you're afraid of lightning hitting your equipment at work and causing your job to go away, this ought to open your eyes. Okay. I'd say that 30, 40, 50% of the computer hardware is going to either have to be restarted or it's going to have some physical damage to it. But with adequate smart folks like y'all out there, basically you should be able to salvage and recob together some sort of system to get things back moving toward normal. I hope there is. Okay, this is a big point. Everything today runs on digital this, that, and the other. The internet, distributed control systems, SCADA, all that stuff is digital. Everything. The digital infrastructure has become a single point of failure for this country. If you screw up the digital control systems and the internet, we're going to go down. Does anybody doubt that? Does anybody here think that they could make it through the day without coming up with the trimmers if they couldn't just get to the internet? Hey, Bill, could you find something out for me? Oh, sure. Let me go Google. Can't do that. All right. Banking institutions are going to be trying to figure out how to get power and data communications back up. Nothing is going to get fixed until the money flows again. It's going to be a priority. Anybody doubt that? I mean, if JEA needs fuel and they call up Lakeland or they call up Orlando Utilities and go, man, could you send a barge of number 6 fuel oil up here? They go, yeah. Can you give me a routing number? Oh. Can you send somebody down with a check? Oh. You know, the simplest of everything depends on money transfer. Okay. I'll bet you that some of the banks and credit unions will cob together some form of emergency power and work internally to get things going for themselves. And then hopefully after that happens, they will share the wealth and expand the help outwards. Chemical sector. Being a railroad fan, I know how many rail yards there are in this town. And every one of those railroads is slap full of hazmat in tank cars and box cars. So there is some need for somebody to keep an eye on explosives, flammables, poisons, all that kind of stuff. It's going to require manpower from somewhere to keep that stuff safe. In addition to that, there's a lot of local businesses that deal with what the Homeland Security calls chemicals of interest. That's all the stuff that I used to buy mail order when I was in high school and played with and did things I wasn't supposed to. Anyhow, there's 8 major rail yards in this town, and there's stuff everywhere. Nobody is safe from exploding rail cars. Anything that has to do with government facilities will probably be converted over to feeding and watering holes. Okay, I've been out after every hurricane since I was about 30, and I'm 64. Okay, the local governmental places become the point of distribution. Okay, you can forget going to any concerts or video movies or anything in any of these facilities or going to a ball game. It's going to be feeding places. All right. Critical manufacturing sector. Some of the critical manufacturing that I know of in Jacksonville is rail car and locomotive repairs, power generation repairs, airframe repairs, storage battery manufacturing, critical medical devices, ocean-going ship maintenance and repair. It's everywhere. All that's going to close down. No power. No people to come to work. Hey, it was like that this morning, wasn't it? Okay. All right, go again. Defense industrial base sector. They'll be shutting that stuff down basically because the people can't get to work and there's no electricity for them to do anything when they get there. So you need to think ahead. You as a provider for your family, do you have an emergency plan for your family? Can you shelter in place? Can you stay with another family? What's your spouse and family going to do while you're out there fixing critical infrastructure? I have that problem for the last 35 years working for JEA. I was critical personnel. Every time we had a storm, I was on duty. Whether I had anything to do or not, I was away from the house. Is your household prepared for long-term disaster? Do you have 2 or 3 weeks worth of non-perishable food, water, shelter, medications, cash, fuel, means of protection? Does your family have a way to communicate? Forget cell and landline telephones. They will not work. Is your personal vehicle capable of dealing with the issues that might come up? Is it in good shape? Do you have some fuel in it? How about your business itself? Do you have a continuity plan? What does your company do when the doo-doo hits the rotary oscillator and things get straightened up and you come back to work? Even after a hurricane, that's a huge deal. Backup power. How's your office going to work without backup power? reliable, independent communication. What can you do to ensure that you have communication with other businesses you work with? These are all questions that there's got to be some answers to, and I sure as heck don't know them all. Do you keep some food and water and personal needs to keep the employees coming back to work for a couple of weeks? Is there a way to do that? Do you know how to protect the critical electronic gear at your facility? If you, the IT genius for your little company, basically buys a few devices and takes a few steps, you can help to protect your gear. Okay? Or you can have spares. Have a couple of spare servers and tablets and all that kind of stuff put away in a EMP-proof box. Is your company capable of paying the employee's salary in cash for a couple of weeks so that they'll stay working for you? Okay, this report of the Commission to Assess the Threat to the United States has been 4 different editions in the last 20 years, roughly. It was commissioned by the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee. Okay, there's been a lot of, they forced manufacturers to test equipment and test cars. The only thing that I didn't have data on was a 747. Nobody would let them play with a 747 to see if they could kill the electronics on it. But cars, trucks, televisions, ham radio gear, you name it, it's all been tested. They know what it can deal with, okay? It's all in this report. The newest version, and all of this stuff is extremely credible. It's written by, the first report was written by the guys who designed and tested the first hydrogen bombs. These guys are true nuclear scientists, okay? They know what they're talking about. The report is easy enough that your grandmother can read it if you read it. So, same for this one here, okay? There's 2 novels out, there's a couple of novels out there about EMP and how it would affect the United States. Well, this one by William Fortson, 1 Second After, is a New York Times bestseller. It's a spectacular book. The only thing wrong with the book, the only thing they got wrong was they said that all of the cars quit. That's just not true. And the EMP Commission report is well worth, if you are tasked to look at the survivability of your company, that's where you want to start. Okay, I saw this cartoon years ago and it was not funny then, and it still isn't. You don't mind if we work while we talk, do you? That's what's going on right now. Okay, enough of me. Are there any questions? I know everybody's sitting there going, damn, I didn't think he'd ever stop talking. This is usually the looks that I get. It's a whole lot of information. It's unpleasant. Nothing that you heard here tonight is made up. Everything is from a source that's a scientific white paper, a military white paper. And I'm sure there's a lot more of it that I can't get to because there's a whole lot of stuff about the subject that's still classified. But I've read every damn white paper that I could get my hands on since 2007. Yes?
Why do you think that any of these electric utilities are even going to be able to get up and running? Repeat the question.
He wants to know why I think that any of these electric utilities can get back up and running. It certainly will not be easy. If they continue to kind of put the blinders on and don't pay any attention, it will make it much more difficult. I believe that with the right technical crews being given freedom to do what they know needs to happen, the electric utility systems can be brought back to life. The electric and water and sewer utility people are incredibly resilient. They're freaking incredibly smart. All you need to do is tell them to get started and get the hell out of their way.
How many of them even live within 10 miles of the place where they work?
That is a key.
You can't walk.
I'll tell you what, I've spent weeks in the power plant without going home. We're used to that.
Well, your family's going to be starving at home.
Not my family. My family, okay? I learned 30 years ago that as power plant engineer that I was considered essential And my wife and I had that long discussion, and my boys have been brought up with that attitude, okay? It can be done. The problem is it isn't done very much.
How many of your coworkers are ready for that?
10%.
You're gonna have 10% already small.
1% does the management decision making, and the rest of the smart guys have to get out and get their hands
I
dirty.
mean, look at your presentation, you could really shorten it down. It'll be so catastrophic that
You're absolutely right.
98% of people are gonna starve, and the other 2% are gonna eat each other.
You're a little bit high. The official estimate of the U.S. government is 90% in 90 days. 90% in 90 days. It's a classic definition of a decimation, killing off 9 out of 10 or only having 1 out of 10 survive.
I mean, even if you can get the power plant working, you've got a limited amount of fuel, and who's gonna send us more fuel? I think Saudi Arabia.
It's a huge subject, isn't it?
Nobody's gonna, your money's gonna be worthless. US dollars aren't gonna be worth a thing.
Absolutely.
So we have no way to buy the fuel.
Well,
The rest of the world, isn't gonna want to support 300 million people.
it's a huge deal. And people go, when you look at an emergency situation, or you're planning for emergency planning, basically you break your subject down by how severe is it, how likely is it, and there's one more. I'm running out of energy. But anyhow, one of those things is that lower end of the likelihood scale, but the severeness of what happens if it does happen is huge. So multiplying those factors together should make it apparent to most intelligent people that, no, this doesn't have to be priority 1, but it ought to be up there somewhere, way above where it's at. There are things that can be done. There are technical solutions to all of this stuff. Somebody's got to get off their ass and do it. And I don't know how to make it happen. I really don't. But I have taken
I just watched all these people get abandoned in Afghanistan.
You're not helping my attitude. Oh, I know, absolutely. So what is
I don't want to
my?
offend anybody. We got a president who really, he's brain dead, and I don't even know who's in charge. Something like this happens,
I don't.
The oligarchs have their bunkers. They've got New Zealand to go to,
It's pretty grim. But the problem, the bottom line is I've been out after hurricanes, and hurricanes are really just about this bad in a local. Katrina, Hugo, I didn't get started doing this until after Andrew. Andrew was apparently one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to man, But Hugo in South Carolina, and then Katrina in Mississippi, not Louisiana. Thank you very much. I gave a presentation just the other night to our ham radio group on what I saw after Katrina in Mississippi. It was just mind-boggling. Okay, but we were able to turn it around. Man is incredibly resilient. And worst comes to worst, once you get rid of a bunch of the dumbasses, basically once you just push them away and get the good people working together, it's the only hope you have, sir. I refuse to be beaten down by something like that. That's why I give this presentation. I think that every single person that hears about this and maybe goes home and goes, there's a few things I could do around this house that might make it a little bit more survivable. So, or a lot of other things. But anyhow, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You're absolutely right. The first time I gave this presentation in 2007, I was in front of 80 people from the local ham radio club, and I was expecting about a third of them to get up and walk out because it's so damn depressing. And I think every single one of them came up and shook my head and goes, wow, that was amazing. And so I've given, and this is a kind of a revision 415 of that presentation. So I try to keep it up to date. I'm watching what's going on in the Middle East right now. I'm scared to death. Okay. we basically have left a lot of technology over there that could be used to harm us. I don't mean the people in the Middle East. They could bring that crap over here and use it on us. So.
So do you know of any employers in this town who've got like boxes of MREs hanging around to feed their workers?
We did. Yes.
I mean, you guys do.
We did.
Anybody
We had
else?
to.
I mean, because all these other people here are like,
Well,
I'm hungry, I'm going home.
all I can tell you is if you accept 10% of what I told you tonight, you need to be thinking about what to do for your family. Substitute EMP and throw hurricane out. There should be a hurricane in the city here. It would be just like that. It would be no different for months.
A hurricane, you can depend on other people in other states to come help you.
I'll
With
say
EMP, there's no help.
That's true. But for that first 2 or 3 weeks, it would, oh my God, I spent 10 days on the ground after Katrina, and that was just unbelievable. I can't begin to describe it to you without showing you another 1-hour presentation. And I do have it in the laptop here. Rajesh knows that I don't go anywhere without my thumb drive. Okay, I'll let somebody else talk for a while.
Hold on, you have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I wanted to ask about your opinion on this. So basically, one thing that climate activists try to push for is like diversifying their energy sources. So like what they say is like they want to push for solar energy, so like have massive solar farms, have nuclear, have water. Like if we were to diversify our energy grid, like would that improve our resistance to, say, an EMP attack at all? Or is it just by property of how our infrastructure is designed, aka transferring electricity?
Okay.
Like would that just be kind of negligent?
Okay. Right now, the big problem we have specifically in Florida, but pretty much US-wide, is everything in the United States is powered by either natural gas, number one. Number two is, I'm not even sure what number two is. It's changed so much in the last couple of years. Fuel oil is at the bottom, diesel or and I'm talking electric generation.
Todd, he's trying to get your attention because you still have the internet people who are listening.
Yes,
We have 4 or 5 people online that are
You
listening.
can, you can talk from over there. It's fine. You can talk from
Yeah,
down
you
there.
can be downstairs and talk.
Okay.
If you need to sit, go ahead and sit.
That's
Am I okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just it. If you need to sit, you can sit. We got the
I got the-
webcam.
I'm good. One of the big problems we have in the U.S. Okay, the question basically had to do is diversifying energy in the U.S. Would it be a help to help us get rolling again here? That's the bottom line, and I would say yes to some extent. The big problem we have right now in the United States is we are more than 50% dependent on nothing but natural gas and LNG, liquefied natural gas. Just 10 years ago, we were heavy into coal, and coal is an energy that you can store on the ground and you can let it get wet and it can sit out there for years. And when you need it, you pick it up and put it on the conveyor and burn it. Natural gas has to be mined from the wellhead, pumped to the place of use and used. There's no practical way to store it. Same thing with solar and wind. How do you store it? Well, now we're talking about batteries and pump storage and 100 other things, okay? Still not very practical.
Let's
Oil.
put that battery in a Faraday cage.
Yeah, oil, diesel, coal, those type of fuels are storable. So why not have some of those and some of the natural gas because it's cheap and clean, but we aren't doing that. We're all going 90 to nothing to natural gas. And I promise you in your lifetime, it will cause us great problems. Okay. Do you realize that in the state of Florida, we have 2 coal-fired generating stations left? JEA, Northside or St. Johns River Power Park was demolished 3 years ago. Okay. And it was a perfectly good operating generating station. It was done for political reasons. FP&L has shut down, as of January, they shut down every single coal burning plant in Florida. All of theirs are gone. There's still one in Palatka, and there's one Orlando Utilities, I think, OUC. Yes, diversification basically isn't going to help us a lot, but it's going to basically it's going to dull the blade.
Right.
Okay. So what can I tell you? Yes.
How vulnerable is like your rooftop solar panels and your Tesla wall?
The batteries. Okay. I am familiar with this stuff. I installed a whole pile of solar arrays for JEA's R&D and show off to the community stuff. The panels themselves, no threat.
Do you
No
want the
reason.
cabling that goes to the panels?
None of that stuff's going to be affected by the E1 or the E3. The inverter that converts the DC to AC is likely to see electronic failure. Okay. Batteries, the raw batteries themselves are not likely to have any kind of damage done from an E1 pulse, the high voltage spark, the high voltage pulse. But a lot of batteries nowadays have battery management systems built into them, don't they? Everything lithium ion has a battery management system in there. And guess what happens when the battery management system quits? The battery's useless. Whose idea was that? The battery manufacturer sells batteries. Sony into lithium battery packs for your camcorders and your cameras. They have a chip in them, and they're set up to where when you plug the battery in and turn your camcorder on, and basically it goes, and it basically says, yes, I'm a Sony battery. Yes, I'm a Sony camcorder. We can work together. If you buy a Chinese aftermarket battery, it doesn't have the lithium chip in it. You plug it in, turn it on, the camera goes, hey, you're not a Sony battery. You're mama. And it's out of there, and it shuts it down. Okay. There's microprocessors in everything. Digital electronics, the single point of failure for the United States. Everything. Okay, so your hand's still up.
If your homemade Faraday cages, like you see on YouTube, do they work better if they're grounded?
No.
Okay.
Do not ground your Faraday cage. Problem with taking this is the bane of my existence, dealing with stuff that people have seen in movies and read in books, and half of it's garbage. And then there's 10,000 people out there that are experimenting, that don't know what they're doing, and then they publish crap that people follow. There's a guy named Arthur C. Bradley. If you'll Google Arthur C. Bradley, he's a retired NASA electrical engineer, PhD, and he did a little impromptu government service testing before he retired using NASA's equipment, and built and tested Faraday cages, and he's got some great YouTube videos. Arthur C. Bradley. Fascinating. And he's got a couple of books out. So he's probably one of the few credible people that if he says something in a YouTube video, you can bank on it.
If I store my data, like my family photos, on a thumb drive, will that be safe?
Put it in. Have you got a metal Band-Aid box? Okay, there you go. Faraday cage. Put that inside. I know that in the last 6 months, you've gotten one of those Mylar baggies that a computer card comes in. Those are some of the best EMP protection for devices that you can get. That's why they're shipped in them, to keep electrostatic charge down. But the Mylar coating is aluminum on Mylar plastic. It's an electrical conductive coating. If you put your stuff in there and wrap it up and put a Frito bag clip on there, Mr. Bradley discusses and tests that stuff with professional gear. Look at his videos. Arthur C. Bradley. Yes.
Right. So in your presentation, you talked about what we could do on individual level to make sure that our family's protected. But
Yes.
do you have any recommendations as far as what we can do from like a societal level, like say what we should be voting for in order to like try to protect us in a way? Like one of the takeaways that I kind of got from this is that like centralization is like a double-edged sword. Like it gives us efficiency, so we're able to operate leaner, but at the same time it exposes us to huge risk. Like, is there something that we could like talk to our managers about to say like, hey, like maybe don't put the profit motive so high that.
Oh, boy, that's not gonna go very far.
I know, but I want to hear your opinion, like,
Okay. The reality is that things are going to go on business as usual. Business as usual. Profit margin's going to be at the top. All good things that happen to you start with you. Okay? You know how to get in touch with me. I can give you some details. I can send you the links to the YouTube videos. The first thing is to do common sense preparation for hurricanes. I mean, make sure your fuel, you have a couple of jugs of gas stored somewhere safe at your house, so that when everybody else has run out of gas, basically you can still get your kids to the hospital if you have to, because you still have 2 or 3 gallons of gas.
Right.
Okay? I mean, simple. How much thinking does it take? You know, preparation. Most people today live hand to mouth, both financially and food in the house. Have a couple weeks of food put away in your call it your pantry or your kitchen, whatever. Okay, that only makes good sense financially and preparation wise, safety wise. There's 1,000 things, yes, that you can do, and they're all common sense. Okay. If you're worried about losing electronic equipment, like your communication gear, because I can tell by looking in your eyes that you want to be a ham radio operator and have ham radio equipment. Can you see that, Brandy? Can you see it in her eyes? If you have a set of walkie-talkies so that you and your neighbors can talk without leaving the house, because the phone and the cell phones don't work, you can buy those Motorola FRS radios at Home Depot or Walmart. Put those suckers in a steel box. When I say a steel box, get a saltine box, a standard saltine can that crackers used to come in. Put the lid on it. That'll take care of a lot of the problem. And if that doesn't make you happy, get metal duct tape, the aluminum duct tape, and wrap the crack, the steel. That will, you'd be surprised when you test those simple little things, how well it works. I was astounded. So there's 1,000 things you can do. I'd be glad to sit down with anybody over a beer or even a cup of coffee. You'll have to drink the coffee, and we can discuss 1,000 ways to skin this cat.
If you get him a coffee, you have to bring him a can of beer. Just
There we go. I like that idea.
what normally happens is he gets me coffee and I have to get him a can of beer.
There we go. Nothing wrong with that.
Is that PowerPoint poisoning?
oh,
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Good question.
What about home generators?
Home generation.
Yeah, like, I got a generator.
What brand is it?
I don't know, I bought it
From Brady. It's on. It's just a standard one. It's not hooked up to the grid or anything.
No, it's a standalone unit, it's in my backyard, I'm gonna have to run an extension cord for that.
Most of those suckers don't even have points and condenser in them anymore. They're about as, if it's a simple one, it's got an engine that says British or Kawasaki or Kohler on it. It's almost certainly got what they call it a breakerless ignition system. And it's so cheap and superficial the way that it works, but it's great because there's nothing to fail on. Okay, there's nothing except for the pull cord breaking or it running out of gas or you running it out of wood. Okay, those suckers will be pretty darn sturdy. The Honda EU series, the inverter generators, not so much. They're slap full of computer stuff. But if you have them, and you're gonna laugh, if you put them back in their original box that they were shipped in, just because it's a nice sturdy box, and go into that kitchen when the wife's not watching and steal the big roll of aluminum foil and put aluminum foil around that sucker this way and that way and tape it up good and come back and put a second layer on there, that sucker will be damn near impervious. It's probably 40 or 50 dB of pulse reduction just from a couple layers of aluminum foil. As long as there's no cracks. Doesn't have to be thick, it just has to be electrically conductive. Ours Arthur C. Bradley, watch his YouTube videos. He's very credible. I have found no places in any of his videos or anything he's had to say that I could poke a finger at. Had a kid down the street about 10 years ago. I worked with the science fair for 40 years. This guy down the street's got a kid in homeschool, and he wants the kid involved in the science fair. He says, I want to bring him down. He wants to build a Faraday cage. Can you help him with that? And I said, well, just build a box out of window screen, metal window screen, and put a transistor radio in it, turn it on FM, and put it inside that sucker, and open and close the door. Huh. It's amazing how you close the door on the sucker. I'm talking a window screen with the 16th-inch mesh, not the mesh this big. Fine mesh. You close the door. If the door seals electrically all the way around, and you close the door, the radio signal goes. Amazing. If FM radio can't get in, EMP can't get in. It's just that simple. Read Arthur C. Bradley. It's simple. He explains it incredibly well, and he's very credible. You can believe what he says. Okay. Anybody else? Randy owes me another beer.
Why do I? What is
Your chest can buy, I don't care.
Okay.
Put it off on him. Anyhow, like I said, I give this presentation because I figure that every person, especially technical people like that, y'all can understand this, sit down, think about it. If anybody wants a copy of the presentation, I'll be more than glad to give it to you so you can sit down and read it. Bring coffee. And then if you have questions, my email address is at the very end of it. You can send me an email. Yes, darling.
You didn't go over the satellites, so now I'm kind of curious.
I'm sorry.
Last time you went over the satellites and how that affected the synchronization with the financial facilities. You didn't do anything on the satellite portion this time. So my question is, can you go like a 1-minute synopsis of that?
Of what? How will satellites be affected? How will satellite communication, like satellite phones, digital communication for the internet, and all that kind of stuff? I think that there's a feature of the near-Earth space called the Van Allen radiation belt. That is man-caused. When I was a little dweeb and I was interested in astronomy, I go, ooh, cool, the Van Allen radiation belt. That is basically the remains of all the airburst, nuclear, high-altitude nuclear testing that the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese did in the 50s and 60s. Okay? It causes problems for any satellites that reside in that area. It's just nothing but energetic electrons. And it causes deterioration of solar panels. It just causes all kinds of hateful things. Okay, there's some effect long-term on stuff that's operating above the atmosphere. Obviously, if you're too damn close to the nuclear device when it goes off, it's going to torch you. Probably line of sight, which means half of the satellites are on one side of the Earth and half on the other side. And the third of them that are closest to that device going off are probably going to sustain some damage. I have nothing. I'm an engineer. I understand how this stuff works. Okay. Try to find any kind of information on a paper anywhere backing that up or refuting it. Okay. But I work with radio gear as a hobby. I'm an engineer. I'm an analytical thinker. I can read and I can research. That's my conclusion. Okay. The ground stations, on the other hand, I mean, satellite link has guys up here, guys down there. The guys down here are going to have problems if they're within line of sight of that device when it goes off. Okay. There will be some problems with it. I would never depend on satellite communication for anything critical. I've done that twice during hurricane situations. Did you know that your satellite phone doesn't work too darn well when it's raining hard outside? The water absorbs the RF. That's why cell phones don't work too good in the forest when there's drippy, wet leaves everywhere, because the water absorbs the microwave RF. Okay, enough of that. Yes?
Just one last question.
Okay.
So now the people are transitioning to the smarter world. So now all the houses are going to transition to the smarter homes with the solar panel. The cars going to the EV. Like the future, we're gonna see like less gas vehicles and less electricity-based houses. So do you think that's still a safety light in the future, or is it still good considering this even issues which you showed? Is it like with the smart approach, are we going away from these evil issues, or it's still going to be there eventually?
I've never looked under the hood of a Tesla. I have been involved in smart utility stuff. I didn't like it when they first talked about it. If it's connected to the internet, it's connected to a wire. I mean, either power or a cat cable. A lot of it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi now. Still got to get powered somehow. I think that microprocessor controlled stuff is sensitive, and if it's got any kind of wire attached to it, whether it's the thermostat on the wall that it runs off the 24-volt AC power that comes from the power supply inside the HVAC unit, or whether it's a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi enabled device, it has to either have a battery in it, which means it's probably pretty safe because there's no wires. But if it's got a wire that goes to a wall wart, plugs into the wall, there's your antenna to bring the EMP into it. I hate complicated stuff. Okay?
And it's pretty comfortable.
It makes life easy for lazy people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just that blunt. I try to avoid that kind of stuff. It's designed. It is throwaway. There's nothing in one of those thermostats that I can fix when it doesn't work. Until a year ago, I had a mercury thermostat at my house because when something went wrong, I could take it out to the shop and tweak on it and go, oh, let's put it back in, and it worked perfectly. Something goes bad on the thermostat or one of those automatic switching boxes. What does Radio Shack call it? The Super X control system for your house or whatever. It's all disposed of. And once you got an EMP pulse, I think it's all going to be disposed of. Just plain throw it in the trash. That's my opinion. If you read the EMP Commission report, it's the most recent one is 2017. They tested all kinds of stuff at the maximum level of EMP that they could generate with their test device, 50 kilowatts per meter. And a hell of a lot of stuff died. Some surprisingly survived. Go figure. But electronic stuff with transistors, large scale integrated circuits, chips, surface mount stuff is going to be toast.
And how much did you say the sun generated?
I'm sorry?
How much did you say the sun, so the EMP that came from the sun?
That's
How much was that generating? Because I think you said a general idea. What was the how much was it?
I don't have a number for that. I've never seen one.
Okay.
But that's the plasma, the solar coronal mass ejection coming and clashing with the earth. It's going to be unique for every time it happens. It's going to be great big bang sometimes, and sometimes it's going to.
And the only known one we've ever had was in 2016.
That
caused an actual.
The Carrington event and the one in 2009 in the Northeast, those were the two that really got our attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the only ones that actually like did something that we noticed. I
Yes.
mean, there's been smaller ones where they've seen it do stuff, but nothing catastrophic like happened a couple of years ago.
Some of the African countries got some of their stuff beat up pretty badly in the 2000s.
Well, I think there was another one in 2013 or 2014
Yes.
that hit Alaska real hard too.
Yes. Go ahead.
They had a big one during the Roman Empire, and they know it because I guess it changed the magnetism of the rocks, and geologists can figure that stuff out.
That's totally out of, that may be completely true. I just don't know. I know nothing about that. Okay.
Well, normally after this, we go and get beer at Miller's or wherever somebody suggests. So does everybody want to go to Miller's or do you want to go somewhere else? Or?
I'm following you.
Well, I'm asking the general public.
I know.
Which would be you guys. Does anybody have any ideas of where they want to go, what they want to do? Or do we just go to Miller's like we normally do?
Thank you, Rajesh.
Yeah, drink our sorrows.
I'm
Is
fine.
everybody in favor of Miller's or do we want
Where is
something else?
Miller? Oh, that's, yeah.
It sounds.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say anyways, for those of you who don't know, it's like, about 3 miles from Josh away.
Yeah.
Roughly, it's, over there off of, Touchton and Southside Boulevard. It's relatively close to here. It's about maybe 5-10 minutes away. So, yeah, it's in Tinseltown, yes. So for those of you who are familiar with the area, it's in Tinseltown. For those of you who are not, it's south side of the Touchton Road area. It's called Miller's Ale House. If you plug it into your GPS, it'll get you there. Unless you're Todd and don't have a GPS.
I still got 2 tomato plants I'm trying to give away, so you want to work on your gardening skills for the EMP. You take one home.
They should be pretty much resistant to it.
All right, anybody have any other questions? All right, if not, I guess we're ready to go.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys next month. If not, we'll see you at Miller's. And next month will either be IL, he wants to talk about data